Hi, Troy Love.
Hello. How are you, Tammy?
I'm doing well. I was sharing before I hit record, but I'm going to share it again. I subbed in on one of the betrayed partner groups and was talking about your attachment wound healing group for betrayed partners. So alternating Thursdays at 11 a.m. Pacific time, you can find Troy for support for betrayed partners on sexandrelationshiphealing.com. He has a men's group every Friday that for addicts, male addicts, that talks about this. So he graciously offered he volunteered to provide a similar group for partners, and every partner has a betrayal wound, and
Mhm.
probably in others, abandonment, etc. too. But just getting up, having a safe place, being able to identify that, oh, that's bumping up against this. I shared previously that I had something and I was like, oh, that's bumping up my against my abandonment wound, and just to be able to go, oh, that's what that is. It's real. I can feel it, but I don't have to like go, oh my gosh, and go down the rabbit hole with it. Was hugely beneficial just to be able to take a pause and acknowledge it, you know
Mm. Yeah.
and move on. But I wouldn't have had the language to do that until we have these little discussions. So
Oh,
thank you.
you're welcome. Yes, I found it to be very helpful for me too. Just to be able to give it a name. Um, what we can name, we can talk about. So,
Yeah, and otherwise it's just feeling, and I feel uncomfortable, and I feel,
hmm
it's all those other things. So anyway,
yeah,
so we don't have any questions. Shall we talk about some of those abandonment wounds or attachment wounds? Or
sure. I'm gonna.
But to those of you joining, we do love it when you throw Q&A at the bottom of the screen. Throw your questions in there. You can ask anonymously, and we'll
Will you give me
talk about it.
permission to share my screen?
I will. Let's see. I have to go to this. They keep changing things, and so I have to make a co-host, and then you can. So
Okay.
there you go. Now you
Thank you.
are. So
Perfect. Okay. So, just go briefly as we do this. But yes, if you have questions, please, um, please, we like the interaction. So, we'll do our best to answer your questions. Easiest way for us to do that is if you use the Q&A. We do have the chat function too, but it's a little easier for us to manage the questions in the Q&A section versus the chat. We'll try to do our best to respond to it either way. But these are the attachment wounds: loss, neglect, rejection, abandonment, betrayal, and abuse. And we're wired as human beings for connection. And so when those connections break or are damaged or are impaired in one way or another, that can cause us pain. And then, depending on the severity of that damage, the the larger the damage or the frequency of the damage, those wounds can get embedded into our nervous system, really, and become trauma. So uh, you can have a rejection wound. You can like not be picked for a job and not have that really have much of an impact on your life, or you can have a rejection wound because you've been rejected your whole life, and that really can have a severe impact in your day-to-day life. So knowing what the wounds are is helpful, because just as a nurse who's doing wound care, it needs to have an understanding of what type of wound it is that they're dealing with, so that they can make the recommendations of the course of treatment that would be necessary to help heal that particular wound. When we can name the wound that we're dealing with, it also helps us have an idea of what that course of treatment may look like. So a neglect wound may look different in treating it than an abandonment wound or a betrayal wound. For a lot of people, we've discovered that these wounds do overlap a little bit, and so you may have more than one. Um, and so I don't get caught up so much on making sure we name the right wound itself. It's helpful for us to put some words around it. But at the end of the day, oh, that's one of my attachment wounds that's being stirred up, and which one is it? There's some helpfulness in identifying it because it does help us understand, well, what can I get out of that, or what do I need from that? But it's not like the be all end all if you don't get it right. It's not a right or wrong thing. And so then when these wounds are created, and then depending on the severity, they are like sunburns in our life. And if you've ever had a sunburn, you can still function, you can still do your day-to-day work, you can do all the things that you need to do, but you become very guarded. You become very distant. You don't want people to come up and just pat you on the back. If somebody does, there's an immediate reaction. There's immediately pulling away, like that hurts, like I don't like that. Or we may even push the person away because it hurts so bad. And that becomes that fight or flight response of immediately a fight or flight response. The nervous system is doing exactly what it has been designed to do. And so when these attachment wounds get hit, we will do the same thing. We will become guarded. We end up maybe even putting up some invisible walls because we don't want to be rejected again. We don't want to be betrayed again. We don't want to be abandoned again. And so we put up these walls in an effort to kind of protect us. And the challenge with that is that we then can find ourselves isolating and being alone, which then actually exacerbates all the wounds. So finding a way to build connection, finding a way to build healthy ways of connecting with each other while also tending to the wounds is how we come to a place of peace. The other part that I really wanted to focus on, and I see we have a question and we'll get there, is it's not actually the rejection or the abandonment or the betrayal or the abuse, though, that's actually causing the discomfort. It's not, that is the wound itself. But what really causes the emotional upset for us is what we've come to believe about ourselves. We have these wounds. I was rejected, or I was abandoned, or I was betrayed. Those are facts that happened. So a child may have been beaten by their mother or father, or may have been neglected by a parent, or may have been sexually abused by somebody. That's horrible. All those things are horrible, but those are events that have happened. The distress happens is, what does a child then come to believe about themselves as a result of those things? I'm bad. I'm no good. I'm unwanted. Nobody loves me. I can't trust anybody. I'm powerless. And those core beliefs get woven into our nervous system and are part of then that shield that we put up as a way of trying to protect ourselves. And oftentimes those core beliefs are not correct, and those core beliefs don't serve us, meaning they don't bring us to a greater sense of peace or love or joy or any of those things. And so really the work, the model goes further, but really the work that we look at is, how do we change those beliefs so that even when a rejection may happen, I remember that I'm enough? How do we remember that there are people in my life that I can trust? How do we remember that I do have choices that I can make? And that's part of the evolution of growth that we go through as we come back to a sense of peace. So huge part of the work right here as we look at the attachment wounds and what we've come to believe about ourselves.
Okay, so let's start with the first question is, how does a betrayed partner that already has trauma that she has worked on deal with feeling unimportant, disregarded, and just not seen by a partner, by her husband?
So that's a beautiful question. So that feeds right into what I was just saying. What does the betrayed partner already believe about herself? Because you mentioned husband, which could be
Hmm.
himself too. But what does that betrayed partner already believe about him or herself because of previous trauma? I'm I'm already, does she or he already believe that I'm unimportant, I'm disregarded, I'm not seen? Because what happens is that with these core beliefs, it's this weird thing. Because I already have this core belief, it's almost like I'm now looking for evidence that supports that. We call that the reticular activating system. It's the same as when you buy a new car, and then all of a sudden you notice that there's a bunch of cars on the road that are just like your car that you bought that you didn't notice before, but all of a sudden you do. That is a part of our brain that is like looking for things to back up its conclusion, in that case that I bought a new car. So we have this belief that I'm unimportant, I'm disregarded, and my partner doesn't see me. So part of that is questioning, well, is any of that actually true? Is it true all the time? Does your partner see you sometimes? Does your partner think that you're important sometimes? Does your partner regard you sometimes? So is it black and white? So part of that is looking at the partner's behavior. But the other part is really looking at, but what do I believe about myself? Because if I know that I am important, that I matter, that what I believe and what I want and my emotions and all of those things are important, it's this weird thing Stephen Stosny says, that when a person wholeheartedly comes to accept themselves and love themselves wholeheartedly, the behaviors that the other person is doing almost fall away, because whatever they're doing, if it's a manipulative effort, doesn't work anymore, because it doesn't have the impact, because you aren't reacting the same way anymore. You're staying strong. You are holding space for yourself. You're like, well, I can see that you got some stuff going on over there. I really hope you figure that out. That's not working for me. I am going to do whatever I'm going to do that's in the best interest of myself and others. And so that's the piece, really, is working through journaling. EMDR works with that. There's all kinds of modalities that can help shift some of those core beliefs of, but what do you believe about yourself, regardless of what the other person's doing? And if you can come to a place that you believe wholeheartedly that you matter, that's where peace comes.
Yeah, I think that that is so true. So having a really solid support network outside of your husband, I'm glad you're here. Join the betrayed partner groups. There's one at 12:30 Pacific time today. There's another tomorrow morning. They're great places to connect with other people who are in a similar situation as you. I subbed in yesterday on the old lady posse, and what I really love is that there are people there that are going, yeah, me too, but here's what I've also done. And they aren't believing the lies and manipulation that their addict spouse is saying. So I think when you start getting validation of, yes, that's him and he's not healthy yet. Hopefully he's working on recovery, because otherwise, then really setting safe boundaries for you. What do you need to thrive despite what he's doing or not doing, is going to be important. That's important regardless. But one of the things I was thinking too when Troy was talking is, yes, taking care of yourself, but also having the communication. The story I tell myself when disrespect me, when you do this, is that you're disrespecting me, you're not working on a relationship, whatever. And it isn't, pointing the finger at, you're doing this. It's like, here's what I'm taking in when you do that. And that person can, if they're in recovery, if they actually are working on being a better person, they can look at that and go, oh, that's not the message I meant to communicate, or I need to go talk to my sponsor, etc., my therapist. But if they're going like, good, I'm glad you feel disrespected. Wow, that's huge data for you to take in as well. So but I love that you share that you've been doing your own work on your trauma. I mean, this is a journey. I mean, none of us magically arrive and go, oh, no, I'm all better. so keep joining us and any healthy support connections that that work for you. So my SA husband is a porn addict and escalated to sex addiction with an affair in 2020. We have two young children, ages 10 and 6. D-Day was end of December last year, and my SA husband is doing well now. He is in recovery and is really working to heal the attachment wound he inflicted. Things are tense there, or things were tense there for a while. We're not sure if we should tell our children about any of it. No. Or if we tell how to do it. I don't want to traumatize them, thank you, or make them think less of their father, but I don't want them blaming themselves for the tension that was in the house. We feel like there should be no more lies in our family. Oh, these are the ones that, like, they so get me, because people go, well, I need to tell my children. No, your children don't want to know about dad's porn addiction. It's fair to say mom and dad were really struggling, and we're really working it out. And if you're going to feel some stuff, and that's us, we're the grown-ups, and it's not you, we love you, and we're doing the best we can to work it out. That's not lying, that's all truthful. But you don't need to know dad was looking at porn. And what is porn to the 6-year-old? I mean, oh my gosh, please. So thank you. I'm glad things are improving. I'm glad you're here. You can never untell. It's like you had discovery and you learned. You can never unhear it. You can never unsee it. You want your kiddos to value their father. He's working on being a better person. He's working on being a better dad. So I love that you're here. I love to hear that he's doing well. And really in such a short time. I mean, that's 6-8 months of, that's a huge shift if you guys are doing that well already. I mean, take acknowledgement, that you're doing well. That's my thoughts. Sorry, but like, that's one of those, when it's kids and stuff like that, it's like, I mean, I've heard it all, and then I end up dealing with, how do we find trauma support for our children, so I'll take a breath. What do you think, Troy?
I don't disagree. You know your children better than I do. Uh, I think you can share. There's probably, obviously, there's been friction and stuff in the house. Even sometimes dad is invited to move out for a little while if there's a constructive separation going on, and the kids are confused. And so being able to tell them at an age appropriate level, like mom and dad are trying to work through some things. Dad is working through whatever. That it's helpful to help them understand that, like, you're looking at it from their world view and what they can comprehend from their world, and what they really want to know is everything going to be okay? So you want to be able to reassure them that we're working through some things and things are going to work out. And if you're scared, then let's talk about it. And if things have happened, let's talk about it. You want to be able to give them a voice to be able to talk about their feelings. I think sometimes in our desire to not keep secrets and be authentic and real, which I honor, like secrets aren't great, we also aren't taking a look at what does the child need. Now, I will say that as the child gets older, the dad may choose to share a little bit of his story with the children as they get older. If the child, as they get older, stumbles on porn, which they will, because the world we live in, dad may choose to say, I struggled with that. And here's some things that I discovered that were not helpful. And here's some things that I discovered that were helpful, and take some of the shame out of what the child might be feeling if they are stumbled upon porn and what's going on with them. So, and then as they get older, there may also be more honest discussions about what's going on. You know your children better than I do. So part of that is like, today you might not tell them, but maybe when they're 18 you may tell them, or maybe when they're 24 you might tell them. So what does the child need in order to be able to feel safe, loved, secure in the environment, and what can we do to be able to do that without like dumping everything on them and giving them more information than they're emotionally ready to handle.
Well, and I think, kids are always looking at what did I do wrong? What did I do to cause this? So I think reassuring them and letting them know this isn't you and we love you. We each love you, you know, and what you said too about not having secrets. Yeah. Cause I hear often from the people that, like everything had to look good on the outside. So we had to pretend like, that there was nothing really going on, or we weren't allowed to have our real emotions. So I think it's healthy for, kids to, see parents working on and working through that, not just, oh, we have to pretend like everything is okay, which, isn't a reality for any of us, and particularly kids. So, okay, next question. Do you have an exercise a partner can go through to help evaluate whether or not to continue in a relationship? How do you know if my attachment to my partner is healthy or unhealthy, or an unhealthy betrayal bond?
Hmm. There's a lot of exercises that a person can go through. It's more of a journey than it is like I think a one-time event. And there's a lot that a person considers. If it's early on in the relationship and they discover and there aren't any kids and there's not a whole lot of financial investment, it may be a whole lot easier to separate than it is if they've been married for 25 years and they have 4 children, or they've been married for 40 years. Like, so there's so many things to consider. The first, though, is what I repeat a lot is we go back to what I said at the beginning of what do you believe about yourself? Can you separate your spouse's behavior from what you believe about yourself? That's going to be really important, because let's say your spouse cheated on you or has been compulsively looking at porn or going to the strip clubs or whatever. Those are factual behaviors that the person has done. What does that say about you as a person? And the truth is, it doesn't say anything about you as a person. That's really hard to wrap our head around sometimes, but it honestly doesn't say anything about you as a person.
Mm.
Uh, that's their behavior. Now we can make up all kinds of interpretations of what that says about me as a person, but in the end, their behavior doesn't say anything about you as a person. So if that is true, then who am I? What do I believe about me? Am I enough? Do I matter? Are there people in my life that I can trust? What choices do I have that I can make in my life? And being able to really connect with those 3 core beliefs, that I am enough, there are people in my life that I can lean on and support and find support with, and I can make choices that are in my best interest. When we can sit in that, you are in a much better place then to be able to evaluate what is in my best interest about whether I should stay or whether I should go. You may see your partner and you may love him, her, you may love them, you may care about them. With the pro-dependent model, we want that's healthy. Like, we would feel the same about whether they had cancer or something. We care about them, and in the end, their behaviors may be something that you say, I can't live with that. My love for you doesn't change, but I just that those are behaviors that I can't live with. But you will be able to be better able to make those decisions if you have connected with your own sense of worth. You may also be able to say, because I know that I'm enough and I matter and there are people that I can lean for, I can stay in this marriage and stay here as you are trying to work through your stuff. as you are trying to battle your own core beliefs and figure out who you can lean on for support and identify that you aren't powerless. I mean, not from the 12 step perspective, but that you have the ability to make some choices to tend to your wounds. I can do that because I know that I'm enough. So part of that journey is really coming to a place of journaling or doing a pros and cons. Like those are some of the exercises that you can do. Well, when we really come down to it, what I would love for you to do is every day practice reminding yourself about your worth, reminding yourself about the people who love you and you love them, reminding yourself about the things that you love in nature, listening to songs and music that uplift you, looking at pictures that bring you joy. Like, find things that connect with your true sense of self, and that will lead you into a better energy place, being able to make a decision that's in the best interest of you and your loved ones.
Really well said. And yeah, I was thinking with codependence, the unhealthy betrayal bond, we don't pathologize people for caring about loving broken people. So, but I think the time frame is really important. But I also think, what is your addict doing? And if you're seeing that this person is working on changing and growing, that's really hopeful. If you're not seeing anything, then evaluating, do I really want to stay in it? If this is the exact same thing or worse in a year or two, is that really where I want to be? But journaling, all of those things. Harriet Hunter did a Wednesday webinar on this, sexandrelationshiphealing.com. Under the resources tab, you'll see previously recorded, and you can find it. There's research about journaling. I believe that you could help yourself, figure out what's right for you, and only you can determine what's right for you. You can get input and guidance, but at the end of the day, it's your relationship, it's your life. So, making that decision, but making it as a choice and not a reaction. I think that's all the things that Troy was talking about. If you're in a place where you're choosing, that's very different than, oh, I just can't take this, and reacting. So next question: can the disorganized attachment, anxious and avoidant, caused by BPD, so bipolar disorder, mom, and childhood trauma, be revised and reframed if the enmeshed husband is not able to hold mom accountable and face the reality of traumatic effects on him, and further reacted to wife and kids? What should the one approach? What should one approach this in order to rebuild healthy family system?
So there's two parts of your question. Number one is, can that anxious avoidant attachment style be revised and be framed because he was raised by a borderline personality disorder mom?
Borderline.
And
Bipolar and borderline are challenging for me because BPD,
right,
okay, sorry.
it's okay. And then the second part is, it sounds like the husband is not holding mom accountable for mom's behaviors and the traumatic effects that that's had on him, which then impact the relationship that he has with wife and children. So the question is, number one, what I'm asking is, is there hope? Is there hope? I wouldn't be doing this job if I didn't believe that change was possible. At the same time, change requires people to do their part. So I absolutely believe that it's possible. Depending on who you talk to from an attachment theory perspective, they some people will believe that once you have your attachment style, whether it's anxious avoidant or anxious or avoidant or secure or whatever, that's it, and it doesn't change. I don't know if that's true. I know that I don't have the same attachment style depending on who I'm interacting with. So,
Interesting.
mm-hmm.
Okay.
And there is research, and I can't remember where you can go, but you can take an assessment online and you can identify different people, and based on that person, you'll notice that your attachment style will be
Mm,
charted differently based on who that is. So it's not, it all has to do with safety. When I feel safe and secure, I'm more likely to be able to have the secure attachment style. But if my relationship with whoever doesn't feel safe, whether because their behavior is not safe or because the stories I'm telling myself about it is makes it not safe, I'm very likely to go right into those predictable patterns of avoidant or anxious style. So part of that is, what are the stories that we're telling ourselves and what are the actual events? Part of what um part of what I'm hearing in this is that the husband is not holding mom accountable. So that is a big thing that happens. Like moms and sons have some interesting relationships across the world, and uh, there's a whole lot to say about that. But the bottom line is, I've never actually found that confronting parents is particularly helpful, nor does it actually change behavior very much. So even if the child were to go confront mom or dad, I've never had a client who's done that where the parent says, "Oh my gosh, you're so right." So I'm not sure that that actually changes a whole lot. What really comes to sense, even when we do dialectical behavioral therapy for treating borderline personality disorder, what we're really trying to help the person come to is a sense of wise mind, where there's the emotional mind and then the rational mind, and they're all over the place. And we come to this place in the middle where we're grounded. And those tools don't just apply to people who are struggling with borderline personality disorder. Those tools also apply to the rest of us who are also experiencing trauma. How can I come to a place of being grounded? And then from that, how do I'm going to respond better to my wife, to my kids, to my coworkers, to my friends and family from a grounded place than from one of those irrational places. And part of what causes the irrational places are my core beliefs. One of the biggest core beliefs that I have is that nobody's going to show up for me when I actually need them. Like that core belief, woo, when that one's hitting, there's a lot of emotional upset, and I go right into withdrawal. I pull away, which people can sense right away. So as he's going through some of his trauma, he's got some work to do around that. Yeah, it may have been caused by the relationship with his mom. He he he's he has some work to do around becoming grounded so that he can have the kind of relationship with you that you're hoping for. But there's also core beliefs that you're having about him not handling the relationship with his mom. And so part of that is looking at, well, are those true? If he's not handling his relationship with his mom, what does that say about me? What wound is that? Well, it feels like probably betrayal, feels like abandonment, maybe. It feels like rejection. Those are the wounds that may be being hit, which are painful. Okay, so how can I tend to those wounds? What kind of wound care can I do around that? But what does it actually say about me? Nothing. I have kids that I'm really worried about. What can I do for that? And that's where those honest conversations, when I really get to that grounded place myself, I might be having conversations with my husband or my wife that says, hey, look, this thing that we're doing isn't working. I'm really concerned about the dynamics that it's having on our children. We got to shift some stuff up. It's a different conversation from a grounded place than that oh, emotional upset place, which I don't know anything about your particular life. But those are just the things that come up for me. Bottom line is, yes, I believe there's hope.
Yeah, well, and fascinating that different attachment styles based on the relationship. I was not aware of that, but it makes sense. What I wanted to share, there's a resource. I mentioned the previously recorded webinars earlier on sexandrelationshiphealing.com. John Taylor did two webinars on Mother and Mesh Men. So check those out. They were well attended. There was a lot of questions, so they did a second one. So could be a really good resource. Dr. Ken Adams wrote When He's Married to Mom and Silently Seduced. He also did a podcast on sexandrelationshiphealing.com. You'll see a tab for podcasts, and you can find that. Those are all resources. I think it was so helpful for you, yeah, because if it's just pointing the finger, you need to be harsher with your mom, and you need to, I mean, like, that just, keeps distancing. But I love, like, if I'm grounded and going, we need to do this different for our children, and how do we show up? I think that's a very different conversation. I did notice too how to rebuild healthy family system. I have a feeling you are building a healthy family system. It isn't rebuilding. I suspect that there hasn't been those components, because with Mother and Mesh Men, there's always it's a betrayal to love my wife because my mom is there. I mean, it's this very complicated and unfortunate, situation to be in. But, John Taylor and Dr. Ken Adams both do weekend intensives for Mother and Mesh Men, and that can be transformative for them, understanding how to hold themselves differently. What boundaries do they need to set? You can't change mom, but if I change my boundaries, and I go, no, I am putting my family first, not my family, not mom first, then the dynamics start to shift. If you change other people start reacting to you differently. So hopefully those resources are helpful for you. Can an attachment wound be a major factor in how an SA initially reacts to realizing that they are an addict? 4 months post discovery, it feels like my SA husband ran to the back of a cave, and is not in a place to be able to consider my betrayal trauma yet. I am sure that is the case. I'm sure your husband is going, oh my gosh, I now have to face reality. And so I'm really sorry. I'm so glad you're here, but I'm really sorry that you're feeling abandoned by the guy in the cave who caused all the pain. So
The attachment wound is the major factor of how he actually became an addict in the first place. So I don't know his life story, but as I've met with hundreds of addicts, they all have wounds of neglect, rejection, abandonment. They all have those. And then usually, most of the time around their teenage years, sometimes earlier, sometimes older, but usually around their teenage years, they stumbled upon sex or drugs or food or whatever happens to be the case. But we're here about sex, as a behavior that like numbed that pain so marvelously that they had to go back and do it again. And so it became a really wonderful way of numbing the pain, and yet there was so much shame that was connected to that. And so what they discovered is that I'm just going to use porn as an example. I know that there are more genres of sex addiction than porn, but what they discover is that porn doesn't reject them. Porn does not abandon them. Porn does not neglect them. Porn does betray them, but they don't see it that way. Porn doesn't abuse them. So all of a sudden, they found this thing that counterfeitly tends to all their wounds. Counterfeitly, I say, because really it doesn't do any of that. Because at the end, after it's all done, they feel horrible. They have this huge sense of shame. That's those shadows of shame show up. And what really has happened, even though they don't recognize that at the time, is that they actually rejected themselves. They betrayed themselves. They neglected themselves. They abandoned themselves. So they turned to this behavior thinking, well, this is what will make me feel better. But in the process, they actually opened up their attachment wounds even bigger. And so they get bigger and bigger, and then they turn to that, and that becomes the cycle that they get into that really drives their behavior. And then their brain gets wired to learn, well, this is how you numb the pain. And then they have the shame. So 4 months after discovery, he is dealing with a tremendous amount of shame because he's like, I I'm a horrible person. Look at what I've done to my family, all of that stuff. Hopefully, he's able to remain sober. A lot of guys really do struggle with that, so they're still slipping and sliding around there. But they pulled away because they haven't figured out what to do with all this pain themselves, which is pretty normal. And we walk them through and help them start to tend to some of their wounds. In that place, they don't have a whole lot of empathy. Um, Shame, we got shame on one side of the coin. On the other side of the coin is empathy. So they're opposites. Like, empathy is the opposite of shame. The way that we deal with shame is using empathy to do that. What you're looking for is him to have some empathy and own his behaviors without going into shame. Like, oftentimes the guy will own his behaviors but then follow up with like, and I'm such a crappy husband, which is like shame, and nobody wants to hear that. We want to hear like, yes, I made a mistake and here's what I'm doing to fix it. That feels a lot better. But they go right back into shame. It's like, stop saying that. So what he's learning is how to develop empathy, which it may take a little while. It's a skill set. It doesn't come naturally for most of us anyway. Um, Shame does, but empathy doesn't. So we have to learn how to work through that and have him begin to not only attend to his wounds, but start to recognize I'm not the only one in this family who has wounds that hurt. You have wounds, and my kids have wounds. I'm not the only one suffering here. And if I can notice that without going into shame, I can say, well, what do I want to do to help? How can I show up? What can I do to make things a little bit better? If I say, oh, my kids are suffering and my wife is suffering, I'm a horrible person, back into the cave I go. No change happens. So hopefully he's in a program, having a therapist who maybe can walk him through. Groups are really great for diminishing some of that shame, the response that he can, so that he can eventually like be here with you, like looking you in the eye and saying, look, I see that this behavior really caused you harm, and here's what I'm wanting to do to fix it, because you matter to me, you are important to me. So here's what I want to, here's what I am doing, here's what you can count on from me, here's what you can see that I'm doing to prove that I can be trustworthy. Those are some of the things that hopefully he'll learn how to do. Um, but he's not there yet. But I have hope that he'll get there.
And he won't learn that sitting in the back of the cave by himself. So exactly what Troy said, all the groups, hopefully he's working with a qualified therapist, not a generalist. The more he's actively doing for recovery, that changes things. But it's the worst period of time when you're trying not to do the acting out behavior and you have no tools and coping skills to be able to do life in a recovery way. So the faster we gather those tools and get support, the more it changes. And it's not easy, but the easier it is, because you've got people to connect to, and you don't have to keep making things worse, because you've got somebody to go, hey, if you did it this way. So hopefully he's gravitating towards recovery resources. There's a sex and porn addiction 101 level 1 work group starting again August 2nd. They're an online, it's not therapy, it's not treatment, it's a 6 weeks 90 minutes a session facilitated live. It's a work group, and that's been a good support and good information for a lot of people to get some foundational tools. That's just one piece. That won't be enough either. So it really is finding out what's going to help him. He needs to do this, but what's going to help him change. Troy mentioned earlier, things don't change. I say so often, nothing changes if nothing changes. It's the definition of insanity, is we expect things to be different if we keep doing the same thing. So we have to be willing to step into a different space if we want things different. But I'm glad you're here. So my SA husband is very needy and wants a lot of attention. I believe that is why he sexually acted out. When he was a child, his younger brother took pills and overdosed. He did not die, but I think his parents gave a lot of attention to the brother. How do I get him to understand he needs to get help for his great need for attention? He's in 12 step, but taking his time and working the steps. We are in couples therapy. Should I bring this up in therapy?
Sure. If you would like to, go right ahead. So here's the thing. We are only as needy as our unmet needs. So if you have a vehicle and it's out of fuel, it needs more fuel. And we don't berate the vehicle for needing more fuel. We just go to the fuel station and fill it up some more. So we don't like, oh my God, we may be frustrated at the price of the fuel, but we don't get frustrated because the car ran out of gas. We just recognize that it needs more. So we're only as needy as our unmet needs. Now here's the deal. It's really nice if my neighbor came over and took my car and took it down to the gas station and filled it up for me. That would be so great. I would love
Does
that.
that happen often for you?
That's never happened, never once in my life. It because it's not my neighbor's responsibility. It's my responsibility to take care of my empty tank, right? What often happens is I think it's your responsibility to fill up my empty tank, which is just going to be really frustrating for everybody because it's not. So he's needy. He's probably got some deep attachment wounds that are going on. At the end of the day, it's his responsibility to figure out how he's going to get those needs met in a diversified way. If he feels like you are the only one in the entire world that's responsible for filling his needs, well, y'all are going to be miserable because you have needs too. You have attachment wounds too. Sometimes your fuel tank's empty and you just don't have anything to give. So he and we all need to learn how to like diversify and find healthy ways to get our needs met. So we go to groups, we go hang out with some friends, we go to lunch with some business partners, we spend time with our kids, like we find other things to do to get those needs met in a healthy way. And so one activity that somebody just suggested is writing down 50 things that I love to do. That might be a hard thing for a lot of people to do. I haven't done it yet because I think it's hard. 50 things that you love to do. Now, once I got that, I have a list that I can ask people, hey, do you want to do this with me? Would you like to do this with me? And they may say no. And yeah, my rejection wound might get stirred up, but I'll go, but I now know that these are some things, I have some ideas of things I can do that are helping solve my need for attention, my need for acceptance, my need for presence, all of those kind of things that I might need. So, yeah, you could bring it up in therapy. I wouldn't do it from a blaming perspective. You could say, when I get the sense that you're really needy and I'm empty, I don't know how to show up for you because I'm empty. And then I'm struggling with, I get scared, really, about what's going to happen if I don't show up and meet your need. What's going to happen? I don't want to feel that way anymore. So what else can we do so that you can take care of your needs in a way that's healthy and brings us closer together?
So, and I hear he's in a 12 step. Great. Is that daily? If he's going once a week, like an hour a week to meet something that is lifelong, and you're talking about, younger brother too. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff. So is he working with a qualified therapist on his own, not just your couples therapist, but is he working with a qualified therapist on his own? I think they used to do the 12 steps, like when a newcomer came in, they do them all, and then you just do them again and again and again. So this, I'm going to take 3 years to muddle through the steps, I'm not a fan. I think, the faster you not race, but getting through the first 9 is where we get freedom from the shame and the guilt. 10, 11, and 12 are, maintenance steps. So, but I also thought, be of service. Is he being of service to anyone else? In the 12th step, we're talk about being of service. And the best way for me to get out of myself is be of service to someone else. So it isn't just about taking, how is he showing up for other people, not just you, but what's he doing to be of service? So that is I think it can be a game changer for people. So, okay, next question. Can you speak to how attachment wounds intersect with those who identify with neurodivergence? I'm 50 something that has decided that or something who has decided my addiction to porn masturbation needs attention, so I'm finally involved in a 12 step. Have a sponsor in counseling. I have also spent the last 2 years in counseling to attend to my neurodivergence. It's complex, I know, but just wondering if you have some thoughts on this. Thanks.
To profess ignorance, I don't know what neurodivergence
I
means.
didn't either. I was waiting to hear your answer because I was like, what is that? So
Maybe
I think
you,
you're going to have to.
yeah, maybe you
Yeah.
could follow up with that, because I don't know what that means. So I don't want to just give an answer and make stuff up that I don't know. So, um,
I love hearing that you're in 12 step, have a sponsor, and doing counseling, and you're finally, because someone encouraged attending to, some addiction issues. That's, yeah, I really believe that we change, and our neural pathways change as a result of doing those things. So, okay, so let's go to the next question. Troy, I think it is so truthful that I think a betrayed partner's attachment style is different from with other people, such as friends, etc. It is painful to attach until the SA gets a stronger recovery. That makes perfect sense when you're talking about the safety.
mhm. Yeah. And that's why a lot of people find the 12 step groups or other support groups, the drop in groups that we do, helpful, because we don't feel so alone, especially around the issues of sex addiction. We're afraid to tell anybody. Like, you're afraid to tell your friends, you're afraid to tell the people at church or your community, because you're afraid that they're going to judge your spouse and think that they're creepy, and you're afraid they're going to judge you and think you're stupid for staying in the marriage. So we don't share it. We just keep it a secret, when truth be told, there's probably like 10 other couples that are struggling with that
Yeah,
in this.
but often you're exactly right. That's exactly what they do. They hear from, to find those safe people. It's why we have groups, but unfortunately, you're right. They do get all that judging and blaming and everything else. It's terrible.
Yeah, which shuts down that. So the desire really is to, obviously, to connect with the person that you have the lifelong connection with, and also understanding that none of us came into a marriage or a long-term relationship completely healed. We all had attachment wounds, and we're trying to figure out how to come together in a way that helps heal and support each other in the best way possible. And when we're dealing with wounds of sex addiction, man, what way to shine a light on the wounds faster and help us find healing better than that? Like, would I wish it on anybody? No. But at the end of the day, wow, it also shows us how to heal in ways that maybe we wouldn't have figured out otherwise.
Next question. SA here, who's full almost. Disclosure was 2 years ago. My wife and I are doing very well in therapy together and working in our own sides of the street. I have told her everything with one exception. I did bring fair partners to our apartment while she was traveling. I understand the importance of total honesty, but if I tell her this now, it will hurt her so much. How can I assess whether I should tell her or not?
Well, the very fact that you're asking the question tells me that you already know the answer. There's absolutely a fear that she's going to be hurt by the behavior. She might be, probably will be. I'm almost willing to bet what she's going to be hurt more by is that you kept it a secret. So, and yes, there will be repercussions about bringing a woman to the apartment or the house. There will be repercussions because that has violated the sanctity of the home in ways that maybe otherwise hadn't. The secrets, though, are what really keep the walls up. That's why we recommend working with a qualified therapist who knows how to do a real full disclosure, oftentimes with a lie detector test, so that we get all of that out on one shot. Rip that band-aid off once. It's horrible, but it's a painfully healing experience for a lot of people, because then it's done and we can move forward. What tends to happen when we keep a little secret here and a little secret there is that we then continue to live with the shame and the guilt and the fear, which keeps us at arm's length. And then our spouse is like, something's wrong. What's going wrong? And we say, nothing, we're fine. Another lie, another lie. And then they're like, but something's wrong. And they start to feel like they're going crazy, that we call that gaslighting. They start to feel like they're going crazy. And when they finally figure it out, they are pissed off because they thought they were going crazy for so long because their gut was telling them something different. So I know that you're scared. Wrap yourself up with some people who are going to love on you and support you, and then breathe into it and do what your gut is telling you that you need to do, because it sounds like you already know.
And I would invite you, when you tell your spouse, that you make sure you're doing it where your spouse has support. So ideally with a therapist or I mean, just getting hit with this, walking along, think you're having a good day. And oh, by the way, I had an affair in our apartment, like, oh, so
Yeah.
making sure that your spouse has support. But I agree with Troy. The fact that you continue to keep it hidden is not good for your recovery, and you're just waiting, like, she's going to leave if you tell her, so you're always waiting for the other and she'll figure it out. I mean, like, I really believe, all this stuff eventually comes out, and if she discovers this before you tell her, way worse the lies, and that you were not, truthful then. So I hope you decide that your recovery, I think it's really easy. I see with sex addiction, that people go, well, I don't want to tell my spouse because, like, we're not supposed to do things that will hurt them. And this is going to hurt them. Well, yeah, it really does hurt them. But at the end of the day, you're basing your recovery on a lie. So you're basing your relationship on a lie because there's still hidden things. So is differing in mental or neurological function that is considered typical or normal, usually associated with reference to autism spectrum disorders. Oh, yeah, and there actually are some therapists that kind of specialize in working with sex addiction and people that are on the autism spectrum. So, I mean, it's a whole thing. There's enough clients who have struggled with sex addiction who are on the spectrum. So, but now, does that help you answer the
That
question?
helps me, yes. So if I go back, can I speak to how attachment wounds intersect with those who identify with neurodivergence? Um, I've spent the last 2 years in counseling to attend to my neurodivergence, and there's also the addiction to porn and masturbation needs. So the the truth is, there's so much diversity in the autism spectrum. I believe that everybody is wired for connection, but how that shows up is very different. I don't have a lot of experience working with the autism spectrum, um, but I think about the ways that the ways that somebody who's on the autism spectrum will self-soothe when they're overstimulated, and they may not have the ability to communicate that in a way that the the rest of the world understands. depending on the severity of the autism and all those kind of things. So part of it is having compassion and understanding for the challenges and the strengths that come with an autism perspective. I think that people with a neurodivergent disorder or neurodivergent, I don't even want to call it disorder,
Yeah.
they are different. They have strengths and talents and abilities that are different than other people. How do we figure that out? It's the same with kids who have ADHD. They have strengths and things that don't fit into the box of the normal traditional classroom. And so a lot of us will say, well, there's something wrong with that kid. No, their brain works differently. So let's figure out how to use the talents and abilities and gifts that child, that adult has in a way that works for them and builds connection. So I don't know your case specifically. I do believe that we all have needs for acceptance. I mean, when you look at the attachment wounds and you flip them on the other side, we had need for acceptance, we need for attention, we need presence, we need people we can trust, we need compassion. Now, whatever that looks like for each person may be very different. Some people may need a lot of connection. They like the touchy feely. There's other people that are like, you can stay over there, but just knowing that you're there is enough for me. So being able to identify, like, I would look at this more on the flip side of the attachment wounds and the positive side of those and what that would look like for you. How would that show up for you? So how can people be present for you? How can people show you that they accept you? What would that look like? What would be the most meaningful way for you? How can people show you that they are trustworthy? What does compassion look like for you in a way that's meaningful? Because I think we all need that regardless of what's going on in our brains. And it will look different for every person because we're all different.
Well said. And what a way to wrap up. Those are what we need, and we're all different. So thank you again. Join Troy Love. So his workbook, Finding Peace, you can find that on Amazon. And that's, talking about the attachment wounds. He has a betrayed partner group Thursdays at 11 a.m. Pacific time, alternating Thursdays on sexandrelationshiphealing.com. And the men's group is every Friday morning. So join those as applicable, and I'll see you at the end of August. So, all right, bye.
Bye. Thank you. Have a